Deep in the shadows of the Zhongnan mountains, the Zhong family was celebrating the birth of a son. But when the midwife first caught a glimpse of the baby, she nearly jumped out of her skin. This child was, to put it mildly, he had a face as dark as a soot-stained pot, eyes as wide and piercing as bronze bells, and even as a newborn, he possessed a rugged, flinty look that made the neighbors whisper. People in the village gossiped behind his back, saying the Zhong family must have birthed some kind of mountain spirit. To them, he just didn't look like a proper scholar. But Zhong Kui was born with a backbone of iron. Growing up, he didn't give a lick about the pointing fingers or the cruel jokes about his ugly looks. He had a fire in his belly and spent his days hunkered down over ancient scrolls, studying so hard it would make a stone statue blush. He wasn't just smart. He was a man of fierce integrity. While everyone else tucked their tails between their legs when the local bullies or corrupt officials came around, Zhong Kui would stand tall and give them a piece of his mind. He couldn't stand injustice, believing that a man's worth wasn't in his skin, but in the ink in his veins and the courage in his heart. Finally, the day of the imperial examinations arrived. Zhong Kui packed his book chest, grabbed some rations, and took one last look at his home in the Zhongnan mountains. He thought to himself, if this world only judges a man by his face, then the world is blind. I'm going to that golden palace to show those shallow folks what a real scholar looks like. With a head full of knowledge and a heart full of righteous fury, he set off with long strides toward the capital of Chang'an. Zhong Kui arrived in Chang'an, the heart of the great Tang, carrying his book chest and covered in the dust of the road. The city was a whirlwind of prosperity, filled with flashy young noblemen and scholars who thought they owned the world. When Zhong Kui stood among the sea of candidates, he stuck out like a dark island among a flock of white cranes. The other scholars, who prided themselves on their refined looks, took one glance at his unique appearance and started snickering behind their sleeves. Some even mocked him to his face, suggesting a man with a face like his belonged in the woods chopping timber, rather than in a place of high culture. Facing these cold shoulders and insults, Zhong Kui just gave a silent, stony smirk. He remained as steady as Mount Tai. When it came time to debate the essays and exam topics, the candidates gathered to show off, each trying to out-talk the other with flowery nonsense. Zhong Kui listened from the sidelines until he couldn't take it anymore. He pushed through the crowd and began to speak on the strategies for governing a nation. His voice rang out like a great bronze bell, and every word was a polished gem. He pulled classical references out of thin air, and his analysis of the empire's problems was sharp enough to cut glass. The scholars who had been waiting for a laugh were suddenly struck dumb, breaking out in cold sweats. They realized that this ugly man had a mind that could outmaneuver the best of them. On the day the results were posted, everyone scrambled to see the rankings. Sure enough, Zhong Kui's name was right at the top. He had outshined them all. The entire student circles of Chang'an were in an uproar. The wealthy young men who had looked down on him were now green with envy, grinding their teeth in secret. But Zhong Kui didn't give their petty jealousy a second thought. He straightened his robes and held his head high, ready for the final challenge. The palace examination. The title of top scholar of the Tang dynasty, Zhong Kui had fought his way through every level of the grueling imperial exams, finally reaching the most important moment of his life, the palace examination. He truly believed that by showcasing his genuine talent for governing the nation, he would secure the title of top scholar and bring immense honor to his family. However, the emperor of the Tang dynasty, while eager for talent, happened to be a man who placed great value on physical appearances. The moment Zhong Kui strode into the golden palace with his head held high. The atmosphere froze. The emperor had been looking forward to meeting this brilliant prodigy who topped the rankings, but when he looked down, he was stunned. Standing before him was a man with a head like a leopard, eyes like bronze bells, a face of iron gray, and a stiff, bristling beard. The emperor actually recoiled in shock, thinking to himself, "This isn't a top scholar. This looks like the king of hell himself." At that moment, the power-hungry minister Lu Qi saw his chance. A petty and narrow-minded man, Lu Qi feared that someone as upright and fierce as Zhong Kui would be difficult to control once he entered the government. He leaned in and whispered poison into the emperor's ear. "Your Majesty, the top scholar is the face of our empire. He must greet foreign envoys and parade. If we choose someone with such a startling appearance, it might damage the prestige of the Great Tang." The emperor nodded along, and his judgment swayed instantly, simply because of the way he looked. Zhong Kui's rightful title as the top scholar was publicly revoked. Standing in the center of the vast hall, Zhong Kui felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His burning passion to serve his country turned cold in an instant. As he looked at the mocking smiles and whispering officials around him, a volcanic rage and sorrow began to boil within him. It was truly a tragedy, a brilliant mind with nowhere to go, all because of the skin he was born in. Zhong Kui stood in the center of the grand hall, the air thick with the sneering, oily laughter of Lu Qi and the emperor's look of disgusted avoidance. A fire of indignation roared up from his chest, burning all the way to his throat. He suddenly took a thunderous step forward, his voice exploding like a crack of lightning that made the glazed tiles of the golden palace tremble. He pointed his finger at the high-ranking officials and cursed them. He shouted his fury, asking if decades of hard study and true talent were worth less than the poisoned whispers of a sycophant. Of all the civil and military officials present, not one dared to meet his gaze. Even the emperor turned pale with fright at this sudden outburst, his hands shaking as he called for the imperial guards. Zhong Kui threw his head back and laughed, a sound filled with profound desolation. He saw through the filth hidden behind the gold and jade. He saw through a world that judged a man only by his face. If this world had no place for his integrity, what use was this mortal shell? "I, Zhong Kui, lived as a patriot of the Tang," he roared, "and in death I shall be a fierce spirit who slays every demon and evil thing." The moment the words left his lips, he turned, and with every ounce of his strength, hurled himself headfirst against the iron-hard golden steps. With a sickening thud, blood instantly splattered across the shining stairs and stained the silk robes of the petty men standing nearby. The prodigy of Zhongnan fell right there, in the very court he had dreamed of serving. To cover up the scandal, outside the cold and indifferent golden palace, Zhong Kui's lifeless body was tossed onto a wooden cart by a few soldiers, ready to be hauled off to a nameless mass grave outside the city. Just then, a man dressed in scholarly robes came stumbling forward, blocking their path. This man was Du Ping, Zhong Kui's loyal friend and confidant. Looking at his once spirited and brilliant friend, now reduced to a bloody, cold corpse, Du Ping felt a pain so sharp it nearly took his breath away. Though he lacked Zhong Kui's fiery defiance and world-shaking genius, ignoring the judgmental stares of passers-by, he emptied his own purse to buy a high-quality coffin and found a piece of land with auspicious feng shui outside Chang'an to personally lay Zhong Kui to rest. On the day of the burial, Du Ping burned spirit money at the graveside and poured out a flask of wine, weeping with a broken heart. "Brother Zhong," he sobbed, "your spirit was too fierce for this world. It did not deserve your integrity. Rest now, for I, Du Ping, will look after your family as if they were my own." As the sun dipped below the horizon, a sudden, chilly whirlwind kicked up around the grave, sending withered leaves spiraling into the air. Du Ping shivered, unaware that above the mound, a wisp of dark energy was slowly coalescing into a human shape. Zhong Kui's soul had departed his body. Standing in the air, he looked down at the only brother who had bothered to care for his remains. In life, he had been shunned by the world. Zhong Kui clenched his fists and gave Du Ping a deep, solemn bow. He made a silent vow in his heart. I will remember the debt I owe the Du family. If there is a next life, I shall repay it. If not, then even in the depths of the underworld, I will ensure your safety. As the icy wind died down, Zhong Kui's figure gradually faded into the wilderness, heading straight for the gates of the Netherworld. After receiving that final bow from Du Ping, Zhong Kui's soul was swept up by the icy winds of the Yellow Springs Road, arriving in a daze at the gates of the Netherworld. In this realm, the sun never shines. Only the sickly green glow of phosphorus fires lights the way, and the air is thick with the wails of the damned. Before Zhong Kui could even find his footing, he was spotted by a pack of wandering spirits. These petty ghosts were used to running wild in the shadows, making a habit of tormenting every new soul that descended. A headless ghost, dangling his own cranium by the hair, leaned in close to try and startle him. Nearby, flicking their long tongues and cackling with malice, seeing Zhong Kui's startling face, they weren't afraid. Instead, they pointed and laughed, mocking him by saying this newcomer looked more like a monster than they did, and must be an easy target. Watching these wretched creatures flaunt their ugliness, a surge of pure, holy energy erupted from his chest. Impudent beasts, he roared. You failed to cultivate virtue in life, yet you dare to sow chaos in death. His voice went off like a crack of thunder, shaking the very foundations of the ghost realm. Zhong Kui glared with his bronze bell eyes, radiating an aura of such terrifying authority that the ghosts felt their very essences tremble. The smaller, weaker ones collapsed to the ground in fear. However, these ghosts were used to acting in a pack. Once they recovered from the initial shock, they felt humiliated by a newcomer's roar. Letting out a collective shriek, they swarmed him all at once, hoping to overwhelm him with sheer numbers. Zhong Kui gave a cold laugh. Instead of backing down, he took a massive stride forward into the heart of the mob. The first great brawl of the underworld was about to begin. As the mob of petty ghosts prepared to swarm Zhong Kui, a piercing, eerie laugh echoed through the gloom. A lean, shadowy figure, with an ox-like nose, wearing a thin red tunic and carrying a large bamboo fan. This was the ghost known as Shu Hao, Waste and Consumption. He was notorious in both the mortal and spirit worlds for being an absolute nuisance, specializing in sneaking into homes to steal valuables and turning people's joy into sorrow. Seeing that Zhong Kui was merely a new soul, he hopped and skipped around Zhong Kui, even reaching out his thieving hand to snatch the scholarly tools from the newcomer's robes. Zhong Kui had been looking for a way to establish his authority, and seeing this malicious spirit walk straight into his trap, he didn't hesitate. With a roar, even more violent, Zhong Kui sent a shockwave that made Shu Hao stumble. Before the thief could react, Zhong Kui's iron-like hand shot out and clamped around Shu Hao's neck, hoisting him up like a helpless chick, glaring with his bronze bell eyes. Zhong Kui barked, "You wretched monster! You harmed the living in life, and now you dare to act tough in front of me." What happened next? Terrified, the surrounding ghosts, nearly to the point of soul dissipation, Zhong Kui reached out with 2 fingers, plucked out Shu Hao's shifty eyes, and then, with a powerful heave, tore the malicious ghost in two, as if he were shredding a piece of roast chicken. Without a hint of disgust, Zhong Kui opened his mouth wide and devoured the demon right then and there. A silence so heavy it could be felt fell over the entire underworld. The ghosts who had just been screaming for blood collapsed to the ground, some even kneeling to beg for mercy. Zhong Kui wiped a trace of dark energy from his mouth and stood tall. The news of this demon devourer instantly shook the foundations of the spirit world. Zhong Kui's violent display of tearing and devouring ghosts caused such a stir that patrolling soul soldiers scrambled into the Senluo Palace to report the chaos to King Yama. Moments later, 2 rows of ghostly generals, surrounded by chilling winds, escorted Zhong Kui to the presence of the king of the underworld. The hall of Yama was eerie and solemn. King Yama, his face as still as deep water, struck his gavel with a force that made the entire hall hum. He looked down and saw the man standing before him, though he had the appearance of a newly deceased soul. He radiated such an overwhelming aura of righteousness and ferocity that even the magistrates in the hall. King Yama shouted sternly, "Zhong Kui, you were a scholar of Zhongnan. Now that you have reached the underworld, why do you not quietly await reincarnation? Instead, you devour evil spirits and disturb the peace of the Netherworld." Zhong Kui stood tall and unyielding, far from being intimidated by the display of power. He stepped forward and poured out all the injustices he had suffered in the mortal world, the humiliation at the palace exam because of his looks, and the tragedy of his death on the golden steps. His voice grew more resonant with anger, ringing like a bronze bell. In life, I had no path to serve my country. If I do not strike, where is justice? Where is the spirit of righteousness? Hearing this, King Yama was secretly impressed. He opened the register of life and death and saw that Zhong Kui had indeed been a man of profound learning and fierce integrity, and that his appearance was truly a rare, celestial phenomenon. King Yama thought to himself, both the mortal and spirit worlds truly need an impartial iron-faced figure who can suppress all evil. Thus King Yama made his decision on the spot. Instead of punishing him, he stood up from behind his desk and declared loudly, "Zhong Kui, in honor of your exceptional talent in life and your fierce bravery in death, I hereby appoint you as the great deity of ghost expulsion. You are commanded to patrol the ghostly realms and eliminate evil spirits in both the mortal and nether worlds." With that, King Yama personally bestowed upon him a crimson official robe and a great seal of ghost-slaying. Zhong Kui bowed in gratitude and took them. The moment he donned the robe, his iron-gray face and bristling beard looked even more majestic and awe-inspiring. Now that Zhong Kui had received his official decree from King Yama, he donned the fiery red official robes and hung the great seal of ghost-slaying at his waist. Standing there, he looked truly magnificent and imposing. However, King Yama felt that if he was to patrol both the mortal and spirit worlds to slay demons and drive out evil, he couldn't do it without a proper weapon. Thus, King Yama ordered his servants to bring forth a heavy solid object. This was no ordinary piece of wood. It was the 10,000-year-old essence of peach wood, taken from the most sun-drenched land in the world, crafted into a rugged and massive peach wood mallet. Since ancient times, peach wood has been considered the essence of the 5 woods, specifically used to suppress yin and evil forces. Not to mention this particular treasure had been tempered by the divine power of the Netherworld. As Zhong Kui took the mallet, he felt a surge of warmth rush straight up his spine the moment his hand touched it, as if he and the weapon shared a single soul. He swung it twice through the air, and the whistling wind it produced carried a faint roar of thunder, making the nearby ghost guards shrink back in fear. It just so happened that at a border of the Underworld, a gang of ancient, relying on the minor Taoist skills they had practiced while alive, were trying to storm the gates of the Netherworld, causing quite a disturbance. King Yama's eyes twinkled. This was the perfect chance for the newly appointed great deity of ghost expulsion to practice his skills, so he ordered Zhong Kui to go and quell the riot. Without a word, Zhong Kui strode toward the gate. When the gang of old ghosts saw a big black fellow in red robes approaching, they were about to start mocking him. But Zhong Kui didn't even give them a second look. He suddenly raised the peachwood mallet and delivered a heavy blow to the lead demon, the peachwood mallet. Before it even touched the ghostly shadow, the pure yang energy dispersed the surrounding yin mists. With one strike, the once arrogant demon let out a blood-curdling scream and was instantly reduced to a few wisps of green smoke. The remaining ghosts were scared out of their wits. They collapsed to the ground, begging for mercy. Zhong Kui stood before the gate, mallet in hand, and roared with a voice like a bronze bell, "Let this be a lesson to anyone who dares to trespass again." This battle solidified Zhong Kui's fearsome reputation throughout the Underworld. Everyone now knew that the spirit realm had a hot-tempered, tough, nails deity with a peach wood mallet, who was not to be trifled with. With his peach wood mallet in hand, Zhong Kui was patrolling the paths of the Underworld when he heard a sudden clatter of noise and high-pitched bickering up ahead. Squinting through the gloom, he saw 5 bizarre-looking little ghosts frolicking in the middle of the road. These 5 ghosts were no ordinary spirits. The burden-bearer, the lantern-holder, the umbrella-carrier, the seal-bearer, and the cicada-bearer. In their past lives, most had been overly clever messengers or domestic servants. Even in death, they couldn't stay quiet, forming a little gang in these desolate wilds to play pranks on passing souls. Seeing Zhong Kui in his eye, catching fiery red robes, the 5 ghosts didn't run. Instead, they felt a surge of mischief. "Oh ho, look at this, Lord. That's quite a face you've got there," the burden-bearer shouted, swinging his shoulder pole to block the path. The lantern holder thrust his eerie green lantern toward Zhong Kui's face, grinning. "The road is dark. Shall I give you a better look at that unrivaled beauty of yours?" Zhong Kui knew that while these 5 were rowdy, they didn't have the blood of innocence on their hands. They were just in dire need of discipline. Deciding to recruit them, he let out a cold snort, and his thunderous voice exploded once more. What kind of petty thieves dare to play tricks in front of the great deity of ghost expulsion? He moved like a flash, a crimson whirlwind. Before the 5 ghosts could even blink, Zhong Kui's massive hands had snatched them up like a hawk grabbing chicks. Piling them one on top of the other, in a heap, he raised his peachwood mallet, as if to strike, roaring, "Will you take a hit from this mallet and scatter into nothingness, or will you follow me and earn some real merit?" Terrified by Zhong Kui's overwhelming pressure and lightning-fast tactics, the 5 ghosts lost all their bravado, scrambled to his knees, and began kowtowing repeatedly. "Great deity, spare us, spare us. We've just been idling away in the ghost realm. We've long heard of your heroic fame at the Golden Palace. If you don't find us too lowly, the 5 of us are willing to be your loyal servants and run your errands." Seeing their sincerity, Zhong Kui put away his mallet and laughed heartily. "Good. Since you truly wish to serve, from now on you shall follow me through the mortal and spirit worlds to slay demons and eliminate evil. Consider it your path to redemption." From that day on, whenever Zhong Kui went out to patrol, he was accompanied by these 5 followers. One held the lantern to light the way, one carried the umbrella for shade, one bore his book chest, and another held his great seal. This Zhong Kui procession was a sight to behold, and ever since, folk artists have rarely painted Zhong Kui without his 5 faithful ghosts. So, we're in the heart of the Tang dynasty. The Emperor, Xuanzong, is hanging out at his summer palace in Mount Lishan to escape the heat, but instead of relaxing, he catches a nasty case of malaria. For an entire month, the most elite imperial doctors are scratching their heads, because no matter what herbal concoctions they throw at him, one afternoon, the Emperor is drifting in that weird sweaty space between being awake and asleep when he hears a high-pitched, mischievous giggle. He opens his eyes and sees this bizarre little gremlin, a ghost known as Shu Hao, or Baseless. This little thief is dressed in a red tunic, wearing only one shoe. The other is dangling from his waist, and he's causing absolute chaos. He snatches the consort's favorite perfume sachet and even makes off with the Emperor's precious jade flute. Xuanzong wants to scream for his guards, but his throat is frozen. He's paralyzed, watching this ghost mock him in his own bedroom. A massive gust of wind slams the doors open, and in walks a giant of a man. This guy is imposing. We're talking a Balto Huainian. Panther-like head and round, piercing eyes look, with a wild bushy beard and a blue official's robe. The little ghost, Xiao, turns white as a sheet. He tries to bolt, scurrying around the palace pillars, but the big man is faster. He lunges forward, grabs the ghost by the neck, and get this, plucks the ghost's eyes right out of its head. Then, with a terrifying display of strength, he literally tears the ghost in half and starts eating it like it's a snack. The Emperor is lying there, half terrified and half impressed. He manages to choke out a question. "Who are you?" The giant stops, wipes his mouth, and bows deeply. His voice booms through the hall. "I've sworn to protect this empire from every thieving, shadow-dwelling demon out there." As soon as he finishes speaking, the Emperor bolts upright in bed, drenched in sweat. But here's the kicker. The fever is gone. The malaria has vanished instantly. He's completely cured, picking up right where we left off. After that wild encounter with Zhong Kui in his dream, Emperor Xuanzong woke up feeling like a brand new man. That soul-crushing malaria that had been clinging to him for a month, gone, evaporated with the morning mist. He sat up, ordered a massive breakfast, and felt a surge of energy he hadn't felt in weeks. But the Emperor couldn't stop thinking about the man in the blue robe, the one with the panther head and the fierce, protective eyes. He realized that this wasn't just a random fever dream. It was a divine intervention. He thought to himself, a hero like this shouldn't just haunt my dreams. He should be guarding the whole empire. So, he immediately summoned the most legendary artist of the age, Wu Daozi. Now, Wu Daozi was the god of painting. People said his brushstrokes were so alive they could practically breathe. The Emperor sat him down and described the dream in vivid detail. He had a beard like iron wires, eyes like glowing lanterns, and he was ripping a demon apart with his bare hands. Wu Daozi listened, closed his eyes, and it was like he could actually see Zhong Kui, standing right there in the throne room. He grabbed his brush, and they say it moved across the silk like a lightning bolt. He wasn't just painting, he was channeling that righteous fury. When he finished and unfurled the scroll, the Emperor gasped. It was perfect. The portrait captured that exact moment of Zhong Kui's terrifying power. His hand clutching the ghost's eye, his face radiating a justice that made even the palace guards shiver. The Emperor was so moved, he had the portrait kept in the inner palace, but he knew this was too big to keep to himself. Picking up from the masterpiece, Emperor Xuanzong sat in his palace, looking at Wu Daozi's painting of Zhong Kui, and the more he looked, the more he loved it. He thought to himself, if a ghost is bold enough to sneak into the Son of Heaven's bedroom, what chance do the common folk have? My people need a protector who doesn't mess around. It just so happened to be the end of the lunar year, that chaotic time when spirits are said to wander, and everyone is busy prepping for the new year. The Emperor made a move that would change Chinese culture forever. He issued a grand imperial decree. He ordered the court painters to work through the night, making thousands of high-quality copies of Wu Daozi's original sketch. He didn't just keep them for his generals and ministers, he sent them out to every province, every city, and every tiny village across the Tang Empire, from the bustling markets of Chang'an to the quietest mountain farms. The news spread like wildfire. People heard about this ghost eater who cured the emperor and literally ate demons for breakfast. They were obsessed. Everyone rushed to get their hands on a print, respectfully carrying the Zhong, got home and slapping him right onto their front doors. And let me tell you, it worked. The moment that fierce, ugly, but awesome face was posted on a door, any lingering bad vibes or hungry ghosts took one look at those bulging eyes and decided to take a very long detour. With the sound of firecrackers and the glow of New Year lanterns, Zhong Kui officially made the jump from a tragic scholar to the nation's #1 door god. He wasn't just a ghost anymore. He was the official guardian of the threshold, a role he's held for over 1,000 years since. Picking up from the last chapter, now that Zhong Kui has become the chief security officer for every household's front door, his reputation is legendary. But Lord Zhong isn't the type of deity to just sit around and collect a paycheck. Besides guarding your entrance, he spends his nights leading a squad of ghost brothers on patrol through the thin veil between the living and the dead. One night, just after the stroke of midnight, the streets of Chang'an are so quiet you could hear a pin drop. But if you had the yin-yang eye to see into the spirit world, you'd see a very different scene. Zhong Kui has swapped his formal robes for a more practical action outfit. He has his enchanted sword strapped to his waist, and though he isn't holding a weapon, his sheer presence is enough to crush the spirit of any low-level demon. Behind him follows a crew of bizarre-looking spirits. One carries a flickering, ghostly blue lantern that pierces through any illusion, and another carries a massive burlap sack, ready to bag any troublemakers. As they march through a deep, narrow alley, the blue light of the lantern pulses. Suddenly, Zhong Kui stops dead in his tracks. He catches a scent in the air, his brow furrowing. "I smell something raw," he growls, and the stench of stagnant mud. Sure enough, huddled by a dried-up well at the end of the alley is a malice-filled spirit shrouded in black mist. It's drooling over a drunken scholar who passed out on the road, its jagged claws inches away from the man's chest. Zhong Kui lets out a cold snort that sounds like a clap of thunder. "Bold little beast, do you really think my title of Great Ghost Exterminator is just for show?" The evil spirit is scared out of its wits. It tries to dive into the well to escape, but Zhong Kui's guards are faster. A heavy iron chain whistles through the air, binding the demon tight. Zhong Kui steps forward and lifts the blue lantern under its light. The demon begins to sizzle and smoke like snow-touching fire, screaming for mercy. Zhong Kui just waves a hand dismissively. "Take him away. Lock him in the Underworld dungeons for a proper interrogation." The night remains thick and dark, but as that blue lantern fades into the distance, the city of Chang'an feels a little bit safer. Last time, we saw Zhong Kui warming up by snatching a few petty thieves. But this time, he's heading into a real hornet's nest, the Ghost Market. The Ghost Market isn't your average shopping district. It is hidden in the cracks, opening only at midnight and vanishing before the first rooster crows. The stuff they sell there is bizarre. Think medicinal powders that let you speak the language of ghosts, or cursed clothing that never rots. It's where every stray soul and mountain demon gather to cut deals. And it is notoriously rowdy. Zhong Kui strolls into the market with his 5 ghost attendants, looking like he owns the place. The moment he appears, Half the stalls go silent. Minor spirits start ducking into the shadows, trying to look invisible. There's always one guy who didn't get the memo. Suddenly crash. A stall selling hell money is flipped upside down. A massive creature, about 10 feet tall with thick black fur, and strangely, only one leg, comes charging out. A notorious bully from the deep mountains, relying on its sheer brute strength. It's been terrorizing the market, grabbing bags of spirit coins and crunching them down like popcorn. Zhong Kui raises an eyebrow and lets out a cold laugh. Where did this wild monkey come from? You think you can run wild on my turf? The Shanxiao turns around, sees a bearded guy in a blue robe, and isn't impressed. It lets out a deafening roar and swings a paw the size of a wash basin right at Zhong Kui's head. Zhong Kui doesn't even flinch. Just as the blow is about to land, he moves with lightning speed. His fingers, like steel hooks, lock onto the beast's wrist. Then, with a sudden burst of power from his core, he shouts, "Get down!" That 10-foot-tall monster is sent flying. Zhong Kui slams it onto the cobblestone street like a discarded rug, shaking the entire block. He steps forward, pins the beast down with one heavy boot, and the Shanxiao's tough guy act evaporates instantly. It starts howling in pain. Had enough, Zhong Kui asked, his voice like rolling thunder. The Shanxiao doesn't even try to fight back. It just bangs its head on the ground, begging for mercy. With this display of pure authority, the rest of the ghost market goes deathly quiet. Every demon and spirit bows their head, terrified that they might be the next ones on his list.